Welcome, truth lovers, to blogtalkradio.com/false reformation. This is your host, Paul and Susan Dosey. This afternoon, we have 4 pages to look at, and let's bring those up. Welcome, everybody, to this bright, sunny afternoon, at least here in Xenia, Ohio. And this afternoon we will be discussing 4 topics. Page 1 is a follow-up on a post I wrote yesterday entitled "A Pragmatic Vote versus a Principled Vote." And page 2, "The time for home fellowship movement is now. It is our time." Page 3, "The Baptist False Gospel," and page 4, "The Marriage Standoff." Okay, so we'll get going here after we do a few announcements here. Greetings from the Potter's House and Tank Ministries, where we are always eager to serve all of your heterodox needs. Our teaching catalog can be found at tankpublishing.com, TANC publishing.com. If you would like to add to our lesson or ask a question, call 347-855-8317. Remember to turn your PC volume down to prevent feedback over your cell phone. Remember, you may remain anonymous. When I say this is your host, you are on the air. What's your comment or question? Just start talking. If you would like to comment on our subject tonight, you can also email us at mail@ttanc.com. That's mail@TomTonyAliceNancyCat.com. We have our email monitor right here and can add your thoughts to the lesson without need for you to call in. And you can post a question as well. And we will keep an eye on this, our email monitor here. Alrighty then, so some reminders before we get going. Okay, let's see what we got here. Let's remind people in regard to, let me see, the Tank Conference 2017.ttanc.com, and I haven't checked the registration recently, but if you're interested in coming, and there's 2 different kinds of registrations there, and regarding limited rooms here at the Potter's House for our special guests, and or those who are just attending locally. Do you have anything else to add to that? Our upcoming conference next year in August.
Well, I know that we've both been very busy about a lot of things, and I've already started doing my research, and I'm bugging you a lot about all of the interesting finds I'm finding out about family according to biblical information and ancient history. I think everybody knows that I really do love history and feel like we have to go back to the source and origin of things in order to understand why we do things the way we're doing them now is influenced by what was done in our origin or original cultures. So I'm excited about it. I'm also excited about the possibility that people will be coming and enjoying all of the speaking and learning. So much to learn.
Right.
And but
okay.
Don't wait to the last minute to register.
285 days, 14 hours and 54 minutes to that conference. We have, we've got a lot to add to the site, but the location information page is up and the registration page. Okay, so let me see what else we can talk about here. We can talk about,
I guess on there, the theme is Exodus.
right,
And I think that is telling about
Right.
what discussion topics are going to be.
right. And so, yeah, the topic is Exodus from Tyranny to Family. All right, and that's the 2017 Conference on Gospel Discernment and Spiritual Tyranny. All right, so another thing that we can look at and remind people of is our upcoming missionary evangelical trip to the 2016 Cross Conference in Indianapolis, Indiana. And that is 7 questions .me. Okay, and let me see what we got here. If that comes up, there it is. Okay, 7 questions.me, Indianapolis. And so basically, we have 7 questions. It used to be 7 questions. 7questions.org. We've changed that to 7questions.me. Now, if you go over to the About tab, I think there's information there, yes, concerning, this is a triannual conference, okay? And if you want to know a little bit more about it, the sort of things that we did there, you can go to About and some of the things that we did in the interviews that we conducted and our evangelical outreach. It's there. And I really need to add the link on there to Louisville. We've got a couple of Louisville websites or PPT websites where all of the videos are on there, and it's a more of a in-depth look at what we did in Indianapolis. We'll be doing a little things a little bit different, but all the information is there. Okay, and if you'd like to contribute, let us know. All right.
I think the big thing that's going to be different about the cross conference is that the first time we went, we did not go to any of the seminars.
Right.
We just handed out information, we interviewed people, we talked to as many young people as we could, and I thought for the strategy that we used the first time, it was effective, because by the time we were leaving, pastors were sheltering their young people from us and trying to keep them from communicating with us,
right,
or even receiving our little pamphlet that we had on the 7 questions. But this year we are registered to go attend the seminars. I felt it important to know what new heresies are going to be presented to our young people, so that we know what new things, what new ways are they perverting the gospel, and that way we would have a more, I guess, informed approach to when we question the young people. So
right. So that's an exciting ministry, and that will be coming up fairly soon, end of next month.
End of next month, 27th.
Right, end of next month. Okay. And I guess let's get going here. I think I have everything up. Page 1 is a follow-up on the article I wrote the other day a pragmatic vote versus a principled vote. And there's the article right there. And there are paragraphs in this article that are pretty decent and pretty clear. But when you reread your article and you don't even know what you were saying when you initially wrote it, that's pretty bad, okay? But there are some saving paragraphs in there that I think are pretty clear, okay? And so what should we say about this? What should we say about this? Well, okay, I'm a very busy person, as everyone knows. And, my primary focus in this ministry is the justification end of it. And, in my peripheral hearing and attention span, I'll pick up on other things and a lot of times pretty much ignore them. But for weeks, you have been commenting to me in the morning and here and there about this whole thing, and I've read it on Facebook and run across it visually on the internet here and here, this whole thing about voting on principle. All right, this whole thing about voting on principle and a principled vote versus a pragmatic vote. Okay, and what this article states. I want to be as loving as I can here, but the more we research in this ministry, the more you come to realize how deeply ingrained Protestant tradition is, to reuse the word, ingrained in our psyche. All right? And so let's talk about this. All right? Let's just jump right in on this page and cut to the quick. And we might peruse some of the statements that I made here that are very clarifying. Some of the paragraphs are confusing, even to me, and I wrote them. But I try to break all of this down with Venn diagrams, which I think are very helpful. Okay? And let me show you something here, Susan. See down here, check a list. I even added some. Okay.
Oh, you added some.
Yeah, I even added some. So we can use these Venn diagrams. And by the way, all of these Venn diagrams are on the program page as well. Okay, so we can kind of page through and look at some of these as we're discussing this issue. You're making some notes there on the article, which is very good as well. So let's just jump right in here. Finally, for some reason, you encouraged me to finally dig into this issue and address it, okay? And so I did. So, I read an article, okay? I got up early in the morning and started reading these articles. And as I stated there, the theme seems to be, let me get the page in front of me here. Let me see here. In one article I read, this is the third paragraph down, in one article I read, the author seemed to say that voting for a person imputes their values upon you as an individual, i.e. you now own that person's values. Okay? And in fact, in this article said, if you vote for such and such candidate, you can no longer complain about this, you can no longer complain about that, you can no longer claim that you take the high road. So basically, you voting for that person actually imputes their principles or lack of values to you. Okay? You identify with the personhood. okay, rather than the elements of the platform, okay? And so the practical or pragmatic vote is said to be just that, pragmatic, okay? Now, what disturbs me about that is, and as I illustrate with these Venn diagrams, is I'm really tempted to believe, and I stated in the article, that this kind of thinking is really influenced by, how should I say this, just dualism or Gnosticism philosophy, okay? And people will initially say, oh, come on, okay, oh, come on. So let's look back, Susan, and apply our own lives to this, how we grew up. And, you know, I get in a hurry. And don't always take the time to clarify in my writing as well as I should. We're not in that article, though I'm sure some parts of that article might seem a little harsh. I'm really not criticizing anybody. Okay? I'm really not criticizing anybody. And the reason I'm really not criticizing anybody is because we are now going to look back at our past life and how we thought, and are going to be understanding here, because we're on this journey of learning, and in fact, we had aspects of our life and in our thinking that involved this thinking. So let's explain how it works. Let's go back and let's use your testimony when you were a young Christian going to a Christian university, this, that, and the other. And the context I want to bring it up in, that you bring up to me often, was this whole thing of, and I'm going to share my experience of this as well. And here it is. I'm going to do the two circles. Okay? Here it is. Christian good, secular evil. Okay? You need some plumbing done at your house? Christian plumber good. Secular plumber evil. Education. Christian teachers good. Secular teachers evil. That's how you grew up. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Well, I didn't grow up with that concept, and I was taught that at Cedarville. Because my dad did not teach that. My dad was a teacher in a public school, and I went to public school, graduated from Seneca High School in 1969. The only Christian school I attended was Cedarville College. At the time it was a college and not university status. And my eyes were kind of jerked open being in this idealistic, if you want to say, Christian environment, because it was drilled into us, especially those who were pursuing education as a career, that the only good teacher is a Christian teacher in a Christian school. Notice it wasn't a Christian teacher like my father in a public school. He wasn't good enough. It was a Christian teacher in a Christian school. And I offended several of my professors because after I graduated from Cedarville College, I began teaching in a Christian school. And it puzzled me that the professors' children did not attend our school. Some of the staff did, But I believe only, in my 15 years there, I believe only one professor at Cedarville sent their children to Xenia Christian. And my history professor was a visiting preacher, what do they call it, pulpit supply, at the church I was attending. And afterwards he shook my hand and all this, how are you doing, Susan? And I said, yes, I'm teaching at Xenia Christian. Why aren't your children going there?
Mm-hmm.
And I was very blunt. I probably offended him. And I just said, why aren't your children going there? And he stumbled around and said, well, it is kind of expensive to send, our children there. And I said, well, if I used that reason, I would never have graduated from Cedarville.
Mm-hmm.
If I had used it was too expensive. And then he goes, well, they're going to a good public school. They're going to Cedar Cliff.
Right.
And they're being missionaries there.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, Dr. So-and-so, how many years of training do our mission organizations require their missionaries before they're sent out on the field?
Right.
And you're saying your 8-year-old is attending a public school
Right.
so that they can be a missionary when we require the missionaries we support to have 4 years in a Christian school,
Right.
and then they go on deputation, they attend language school, and it's sometimes years before they get out onto the field because of all the training, and yet we thrust our children as missionaries in a secular world, and he didn't have anything to say after that. He just kind of,
Right.
I just kind of moved on through the handshaking.
So this is you.
This is me questioning my professor
Right.
who had come as a pulpit supply minister. This was my
Right.
first year teaching in a Christian school.
Right.
And, but I was just following the logic that I had been taught at Cedarville,
Mm-hmm.
and also that had been pushed on us by the Association of Christian Schools International. Every year we'd go to their convention, and Mr. Schindler would stand up, and he was a superintendent of Dayton Christian Schools,
Right.
and he would give the pep talk of the conference. And that was, I heard it year after year, the only good teacher is a Christian teacher in a Christian school.
Right.
And the only good school is a Christian school.
Right.
And for 15 years, that idea, that concept mulled over in my head until I started working on my master's
Mm-hmm.
at a secular university
Right.
at Wright State. And doing team projects with these other teachers, my eyes, I had to pick them up off the table and put them back into my head.
Mm-hmm.
Could not wrap around for a long time all that these men and women were doing in the public school. That was so much more than what I was doing in a Christian school,
Right.
educationally.
Mhm.
How they ran their classrooms, how they did their different units in the room, how they had learning stations. And I was just kind of beside myself thinking, I don't do that. They have 35 students in their classroom, and I can't even do this with
Right.
12. So I was slowly integrated into believing that there were other good teachers out there who did not teach in Christian schools that were better than me. Some were Christians that taught in public school, and some were not believers.
Right.
But they were good people and darn good teachers.
Right.
And so this was the awakening of,
Mhm.
of me, in the
Right.
sense of that everything secular is evil.
Right.
Until I started rubbing shoulders with some of these secular people
Mm-hmm.
who were not evil and who did good things in a secular environment.
Right.
And so that was kind of my first baby steps into
Right.
dealing with this type of thinking.
Okay. And my testimony is that as a young Christian man growing up as a Christian in the institutional Protestant church, allowing my wife to homeschool. I was very uncomfortable with the attitude that I saw, but let me put it in a short version. I was in a homeschool meeting with our coordinator and my first wife, and I heard her say straight up, it would be better for Heather to make straight ups in homeschool and not even learn math and English than to go to a secular school. I mean, she said it straight up. Okay? So, where does all of this come from? Where does all this come from? Well, I dare say, okay, let's do, I'm bringing up our Venn diagrams here, okay? Where does this come from? Well, here, this diagram that I have, it's Venn chart 7, if you can see that on the radio program. You see the two circles. One is evil material world, one is good invisible world, and as you can see, there's no commonality. Everything in the material world is evil. Okay? So let's go to the next chart.
So therefore the only outcome can be evil.
Right, the only outcome can be evil. All right? Now, so this is where this comes from. And basically, this is the basics of Platonism and Gnosticism worldview, okay? This is the part of it, and we saw this very much in Luther's theology and doctrine when we did our series on the Heidelberg Disputation. I hammered this home time and time, that this was Luther's worldview and the worldview of the Protestant Reformation. Now, you can put, this is the basics here, that you can put any two topics in these two circles that you want to. Okay? First of all, let's look at the antithetical view. Find the antithetical view. Okay, let me see here. Okay, in the antithetical view, you have evil material world, you have good invisible world, okay, and the two overlap, okay, and in the middle, where they overlap, you have common good and common practicality, okay. So, what this worldview is saying is goodness and truth transcends the invisible world and the material world. Okay? Most of your religion, most of your world religion and world philosophy and world view, the vast majority of it, is antithetical to that, except for true Christianity. Now, what did Christ do when he came? Christ was the consummate example of the binding of the material world and the invisible world, or the good and the material. Okay? And we could get into so many other things that we teach on this. It's not that the material, and by the way, the material world is not evil. It's weak. There's sin in the world, there's sin in us, but if you're born again, and in regard to the material world, it's weak, not evil. Okay? This is why, and until you start understanding this stuff, you read what Paul says in the book of Romans, when the Apostle Paul says, you know, the earth also groans okay, with us, awaiting redemption. And you read that and you say, what is up with that? All kinds of weirdness. Well, what Paul is saying is the world is not inherently evil. Okay? The world after sin is inherently weak. But in fact is still good, even after sin, because it's still good. God created it good and it remains good. Okay? So, again, in Genesis, why do we begin reading in Genesis before sin comes into the world and God created this and it's good? God created that and it's very good. And you're like, well, I mean, duh. It goes without saying that anything God would create would be good. What's up with this repeating and over and over and over, repeating the obvious over and over and over again? Well, God knows what's coming. All right. Irregardless of the redundancy, what do we have and hear constantly in the institutional church about the total depravity of creation and us, right? Okay. So basically, you have the two overlapping. Goodness transcends the invisible world or heaven and evil world. You have this transcendence both ways. Okay? And in fact, if you want to get right down to it, there's evil in the invisible world. Okay? So it transcends both ways. Okay? So in the middle here where the two overlap, so can unsaved people do good works? Well, they most certainly can. All right. Now, what did Luther believe? Let's find our other little chart here. Okay. Here's what Luther believed. Gnosticism, or Platonism, which was, essentially Luther and the Protestant Reformation, these two realms stay completely separate. Hence, everything that comes out of the material world can only be evil. And because Luther was a Platonist, he insisted on stuffing that prism and that worldview into the Bible. And that's where we get all of this stuff about predestination and total depravity and this, that, and the other. Now what we can begin to do is put feet on this, because you can make up 100 different of these Venn diagrams, okay, and look at where this reasoning comes from, okay, the cradle of this reasoning. So let's do that. Okay, so why did you have the attitude that you have had and say what you said to that professor at the grocery store? So you have the circles here. You've got Christian schools good, secular schools evil. The reason you took that uncompromising stand is because the only possible thing that could come out of a secular school is what?
Evil.
Evil. Okay? Now, if the professor would have said to you, so Susan, are you telling me that nothing good comes out of a Christian school? You probably would have said,
Well, you said Christian school, never
or
public school.
Public school or secular school. You probably would have ratcheted back a little bit. And this is where the Protestants' intellect really doesn't always match up with how they function.
Right.
Okay? Look, if the vast majority of Christians sitting in the institutional church could miraculously be infused with understanding what the Protestant Reformation was really all about, every one of them sitting in the institutional church that truly loves truth would what? Vacate immediately. So why are they still in the institutional church? They're confused. Okay? And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. So, what drove me crazy? What drove me crazy about the last election, not this election, the last election with Romney, was Christian president good, Mormon president evil. Okay? Christian president good, Mormon president evil. Here's the only problem. So, Christians stayed home.
Right, because Obama was not a professing Christian, so the only two choices they had was Obama, evil, because he was not a professing Christian.
Right.
Romney, Mormon.
Right.
Not the same kind of professing Christian. He would profess to be a Christian, but again, we in our Baptist circles and Protestant circles do not see Mormonism as Christian.
Right.
And I heard it over and over again. I have principles. I cannot vote for a Mormon. And our own family members said that.
Positively. Right.
And a lot of...
To vote for Romney would not be a principled vote because he's a Mormon.
Because he's a Mormon.
Okay. So, that's this Venn diagram. Okay? Except for the fact that both of them are evil, and because both of them are evil, the only outcome can be evil.
Right.
Now listen, in these situations, you hear it from people all the time, constantly. One's just as good as the other. 2 half dozen, same as a dozen.
The lesser of two evils.
Well, no.
Well, I see what you're saying.
Right. Okay. So, basically, here's the unfortunate thing. A lot of times, the idea that the two circles come together, or there's an overlapping, and that there's complex principles that define the two circles more than Obama secular, Obama evil. What was his name that lost to Obama?
Romney.
Romney Mormon, Romney evil. The only outcome can be evil. 2 different evils.
Right.
Okay? So you have this blindness, not blindness, but total dismissal of any other principles that are involved in the situation that have outcomes.
Right.
Okay? This philosophy based on, quote, principle, unquote, really dismisses cause and effect.
Right.
The cause and effect of both is just maybe a lesser evil, but it's still evil.
Right.
Okay? Now, in my humble opinion, this is flawed thinking. And it could be argued that my thesis is wrong. It doesn't come from dualist roots. But it certainly, for certain, matches up with a dualist worldview. At least in its function. Okay? Now, when somebody really contemplates how they're thinking about this intellectually, they may deny it. But functionally, it matches up. Okay? So, here's the problem. Obviously, with the Romney-Obama question, at least with a lot of Christians we talked to and a lot of our family members, both of these circles are evil, and the only outcome can be evil. Now, unfortunately, people who think this way, let me find it. Common good or common practicality, okay, other principles that are involved. I think people who think like this really don't know why they think like this, but unfortunately, here's how it comes out. Candidate B is the lesser of two evils. Unfortunately, that's how it's framed.
That's how it's framed, yep.
And I think that's where the adversity comes in, okay, in the way it's framed, okay, because what you're really getting, how that's translated is this way, okay. How that's translated is this way. You've got two evil circles. That's a choice between two candidates. Both results can only be evil, but Bozo's going to vote for this evil over here because it's a lesser evil down here. But it's still evil.
Right.
Okay? So, from that viewpoint, you can see where, voting for a lesser evil is still unprincipled. Okay? It's almost like you're saying, I would vote for Mussolini over Hitler because Mussolini was less evil than Hitler, theoretically. Okay? Well, of course, if the choice is Hitler and Mussolini, you wouldn't vote for either. No way. If the choice is Hitler and Stalin, you wouldn't vote for either. Understood. Okay? But here's the problem. Let's go back to Obama and Romney. Okay? Let's go back to Obama and Romney. Here's the problem. Yeah, Romney's a Mormon. Okay? Obama is, I don't know what you would call him, fine and dandy. But here's the problem. Irregardless of what these men are, okay, there's complicating principles that make up personhood that have cause and effect or practical outcomes. All right? In this case, Obama is a collectivist, which is disastrous. Okay? The only thing that's going to keep disaster from happening to our country is Congress. All right? And Romney, yes, though a Mormon, he's an individualist. He understood what Americanism was and individualism is about. So basically, this was an election against socialism versus individualism. All right? Romney is a man who positively understood what America was about. Okay? Because Christians are ignorant of these things. Okay? because Christians are ignorant of these things. The mentality was, okay, you got Obama, and you got Romney, he's a Mormon. Holy Toledo, do you know anything about the Mormon church? All right, and that's what the focus began. All right, and so basically, to vote for Romney because he was a lesser evil than Obama would have been an unprincipled vote. Okay? So this is what this all boils down to. So I get into this, do you want to stick anything in conjunction to that?
Not
So
yet.
I get into this interested, and you can, in every debate, you can set up these circles in various and sundry ways. Okay? So let's go back to a Facebook conversation I had just yesterday. All right. And the statement is made, I'm debating back and forth, rather long stream here with Zach Vandermeer on Facebook. And so basically he finally comes to say, I think I see what you are saying. Are you saying that people are a synthesis of good and bad principles, and that depending upon context, the good can outweigh the bad, and vice versa? Or am I totally off the mark? Not totally off the mark, but it's not an issue of bad and good. Now, notice how this is framed. And like I told him, he's close to what I'm saying. And I'm not criticizing his remark here. I think the remark is clarifying and close to what I am saying. But check this out. Check this out. And again, I'm not criticizing. You and I have just shared what our thinking was. And like what you said to this guy in this grocery store. Well, you look back on that, and I'm sure you just cringe, right?
Yeah, I say I hope he doesn't remember me.
Right. You think back and on these things, and you just you cringe. Okay, but notice how this is framed. I think I see what you're saying. Are you saying that people are a synthesis of good and bad principles? Stop right there. What is that? Yeah.
Dualism.
Yeah, that's the good and bad circles. Okay? And that depending upon context, the good can outweigh the bad. All right, let's look at this Venn diagram. And like I said, you can take a Venn diagram and apply it to and organize every conversation like this. So, in his statement, what diagram do we have? We have two circles, totally separate, and we have good principles and we have bad principles, and one individual is made up of both of those circles. So take two bad and good circles, okay, and put it inside one man. Picture a little diagram of a man, and you got both circles, good and bad, in each man, and you're going to vote for this man because the good circle is bigger than the bad circle. And no, that's not what I'm saying. What I am saying here is that in the world, in your good circle and your bad circle, in the good circle, you've not only got good per se, but you have practical, physiological elements and the way people think that are very complex and overlap with the good and bad circles, but these principles have cause and effect circumstances or results. Okay? So it's not a matter of bad and good. It's a matter of principles that have outcomes. Elements of thinking that have outcomes. Outcomes is the issue here. Okay? Elements, it's not just bad and good. And what I said, it's not a matter of weight as a standard. It's the cause and effect. So what I'm saying is, it's not a matter of weight, as in you weigh the good and the bad. And because this guy's a little bit less, his bad weighs less than the other guy, we got to vote for him. But see, it's both bad. Again, I think there's a confusion in semantics here. Mm-hmm. If the election is about putting Hitler on one scale of good and bad and Mussolini on the other scale, the heck with that, I ain't voting for either of those guys. Now, there's no, with those two choices, there's no elements or principles that have some kind of favorable result that you're looking for.
Right, with both of those, there's no positive outcomes from either one of their philosophies.
Right. A few more thousand people may not get murdered.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But it's still bad. It's got to go. Mm-hmm. There's no long-term virtue in either of those candidates. Okay?
Right.
So, no. At issue here is a dismissal of cause and effect. Mm-hmm. So if you've got two candidates that where there's not a differing of cause and effect in any way, shape, or form, I understand.
Right. Okay,
but again, my argument through this whole string is the dismissal of cause and effect. Mm-hmm. Okay? And this whole idea, another argument that is often brought into the ring here, is this whole argument that people say, if you don't vote, it's a vote for Hillary. If you don't vote for Donald Trump, it's a default vote for... So basically the argument is that's ridiculous, that's completely illogical, because you can't say somebody voted when they didn't vote. All right? Oh, I don't know. And of course in the stream the way I argued with that is again, cause and effect is taken out of the equation. If you don't vote as one person, could that have an effect? Well, I think so. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's going to result, it's going to at least contribute to one or the other, not, I think to narrow it down to, how can you say that I voted when I didn't vote? Again, I think dismisses cause and effect. Mm-hmm. Okay, why? Because not participating in a choice doesn't mean that you have no participation in the results. Right. Of course you do. So when you're talking about participation, are you talking about participation in the actual vote, or are you also talking about participation in the results? If you're only talking about participation in the vote itself, well, of course, I agree. But when what then are you talking about? Okay? So, basically, what is at issue then in what I wrote in the article? At issue is my argument has now been a little bit defined. Okay, and oh, by the way, I wanted to clarify his remark that is very close to what I'm saying. He said, I think I see what you're saying. Are you saying that people are a synthesis of good and bad principles, and that depending upon context, the good can outweigh the bad? Stop right there. No, that's not exactly what I'm saying, but it's a good framework. What I am saying is that people are made up of complex principles. Okay? And in particular context, depending on outcomes, choice is valid. It's not a weighing of the two. Again, it's considering a person's elements in totality, how they think, and what the logical results of that are. That's what we're talking about. Okay? So my argument in the article states this. I voted for Donald Trump, but I didn't vote for Donald Trump. Well, right away people are going to say, well, that's illogical. Look at what you're saying. My goodness, I thought you were anti-Protestant. I thought you were an anti-Calvinist. That's how they talk all the time. Ha 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 ha. Paul, you can just hear the jeers, can't you? Okay. Paul Dorsey's saying he voted, but he didn't vote. Okay? You know, that's the kind of stuff you hear in church every Sunday, right?
Seems that way.
Okay. I voted, but I didn't vote. What I'm saying is I didn't vote for a person. And I didn't. I voted for a platform. I voted for, you had two candidates who stated their platforms and who have control over that platform. Okay? I voted for the platform. I didn't vote for the person. So here's what I'm talking about, the synthesis that Zach is talking about. And so basically you got a person, okay? And character, or their desires, does not necessarily frame everything that they are. People are made up of complex principles. Let's go back to Obama and Mitt Romney. An individualist, somebody who understands what Americanism is about, what the core of Americanism is, okay, versus collectivism, that person may well be a womanizer, a drunk, okay, you name it, foul-mouthed, Donald Trump, okay?
Ben Franklin. I know Benjamin Franklin wasn't one of our presidents, but he was one of our...
Who's going to badmouth Benjamin Franklin? It would have been interested if he was up for election against Hillary Clinton. Could they have dug up some dirt on that guy? Okay, so he's...
Jefferson the same way.
Right, he's well-spoken.
Well-spoken of because of his principles.
Now, you could have a collectivist candidate who comes across as a statesman of the most dignified sort, but he's a collectivist. Guess who I'm voting for? I'm voting for a platform, because the collectivist platform is going to fill up the mass graves. Okay? So, page 1, what would you add to that?
Well, I think this is one of the things, the theme that ran through, especially the 3 debates, when you would hear the commentary about who won the debate, did Hillary or Trump. And they would all say, when Trump stayed on issues, he was strong. When they started getting off on this, the personalities, then they both showed themselves to be weak. But when he was on principles, he was believable, he was strong, and he was presidential is the word that they used. So I had to sort through this myself. When I had to look through the principles of his platform on what, not his promises, but the principles on which he wanted to build his 4 years on. And the principles that he had selected were pro-life, were pro-Constitution, supporting the Constitution, pro-conservative Supreme Court, and there were some others that we could agree with, but those 3 were primarily the principles that I voted for. And I did not see the other party voicing those principles. And so I think the problem here is when you say that the author of that article that you had read was talking about if the person imputes their values upon you as an individual, if you vote for them, then
you own it.
Then you own their values, and it's like you become that person, so to speak.
Their character is imputed to you.
So then they say, well, you are no more moral than he. And so if we take that logic, then basically there's only 2 people that can be on the ballot, yourself and God. You know, because if you want values imputed on you, then, and you want to be your own moral compass and everything, then the only person you can vote for is yourself. Then if you want to take the higher moral ground, then you have to write in God in the ballot. And so that is illogical. And so you have to go with what is the logic of the process.
Now, I'm going to clarify it this way. In an election, you can vote for, hey look, there might be elections where you in fact would not vote for the president. Granted. No doubt about it. Granted. Okay? No doubt about it. But you can not vote at all. You can vote for a man and a platform, or you can vote just for a platform. Now, with Donald Trump, I was only voting for a platform. Had Mike Pence been the candidate, guess what? I'm not only voting for a platform, I'm voting for a person. Had Ted Cruz gotten in, I would have been voting for a person and a platform. If Rubio would have got in, I probably would have been voting for a person, not as strong as the person versus the platform, but still, I guarantee you, in voting for Donald Trump, I was not voting for the person Donald Trump. Frankly, he scares me. Okay? Now, people say, well, Paul, Trump has made all these promises, but he's a little bit flighty. You have no guarantee he's going to keep all of those promises. Granted, but I can guarantee you this, we know for sure Hillary Clinton was going to keep the promises of her platform. Okay? At least with Donald Trump, there's a shot at it. Not only that, this was the first opportunity in ages to crash the system. And the system does need to be crashed. Okay? It needs to be burned down and rebuilt from scratch. Okay? This was the only shot that I've seen in, oh my goodness, years to do that. Okay? Populist movements only come along once in 100 years, literally. Okay? So that was part of it as well. Business as usual has to go.
Right.
And it may not be pretty. Okay? And maybe it does take a little bit, maybe it does take someone who's a little bit on the nutty side. Okay? And people say that about me sometimes. You couldn't be normal, but that's okay. For somebody to try to head up a ministry that you're doing, you couldn't be completely normal. All right? And I concur. So, we spent about an hour on page 1. Let's move on to page 2 in haste. And what is? Can I find my way back?